What is the best way to handle someone who does not respect my boundaries? Like a lot of these answers to these kinds of questions, it's not a one size fits all answer. I would say the most important consideration to make is time, the timeline. In other words, what is the lag time between you communicating your boundary and this person violating your boundary? Because a lot of times we'll have boundaries, right, that we think are obvious. And turns out they weren't as obvious as we thought they were. And so people end up doing stuff or saying stuff or treating us in a certain way that we think, well, or we complain to our friends. Well, how could they think that was okay? What were they thinking doing this thing or saying this thing in front of everybody and blah, blah, blah. And this is, obviously people you don't know that well, but then maybe you go around their family or their friends and this is all they do with each other all day long. You realize, oh, for them, this is just Tuesday. This is just how they live their life. And so from the spiritual perspective, something that we want to be mindful of is that boundaries are not obvious. Even if it seems like it should be the most obvious thing in the world, it's not obvious to everybody. And there are billions of different varieties of life experiences and understanding and spiritual development, and everyone has great intentions, etc. And so if we find ourselves getting upset because somebody violated a boundary of ours, we have to own some responsibility for that. Again, this is from the spiritual perspective. From the ground level perspective, it's their fault. They should have known better. They're too old to be acting like that or speaking like that, blah, blah, blah. It's all them. They're the villain and I'm the victim of their villainous behavior. But as we begin to become more spiritually mature, and I would say the main indicator of spiritual maturity is you start to take more and more responsibility for your experience, whatever it is. So in this case, if someone is violating a boundary of yours, all that means is you didn't communicate your boundary effectively enough. And if you did communicate your boundary and they still violate it, all that means is you didn't communicate the consequence of violating your boundary effective enough. And if they still violate it, even though you think you communicated the consequence and the actual boundary, then you chose someone who doesn't care about your boundary. So it keeps, we want to look at that person as a mirror. That's all they are. They're a mirror. I guess you could also see them as a teacher, right? They're showing us where we continue to fall short with the type of life experience that we say we want to create. And all of these are just opportunities. They're opportunities for growth. They're opportunities for expansion. They're opportunities for connection, for love. And the big one really is communication, though, right? They're opportunities to communicate because we think, and women get this wrong. Men understand things sometimes need to be repeated multiple times. Women think I say it one time and then they should just get it. And that's not the case for either of us, right? And that's because women have the ability to multitask more than men do. And I know this as a man. Like women say, I want a spiritual man. I want a divine masculine man. So I would put myself in that category. And still, I can't multitask. I'm sorry. If I'm doing something, I'm doing that thing. And if somebody else is talking to me and telling me what their needs are, I'm not really hearing it. The only way for me to properly hear it is for me to stop doing the thing that I was doing and then to turn and completely give them all of my attention, right? But that's how often is that really happening? Because you have to decide, again, this falls on us. And again, there are exceptions too. Some women are like that too, whatever. But I think for the most part, that's kind of how we are different is we have less of an ability to multitask, but men have a greater ability to focus. So they're both important. Multitasking is important when rearing children and, handling a bunch of things around the tribe while the man is out focused trying to hunt the thing and read the setting and figure out where the wildebeest is going to be in the next 5 minutes and things like that. So they're both important, right? If we don't acknowledge that difference and we project our way of processing information our way of retaining things. Like I've been accused also in relationships of not having a great memory. At the same time, I've gone to teach my meditation trainings and everybody tells me their name. It's 25 people in the room. Everyone tells me their name one time. I remember everybody's name. So I know I have a good memory, right? It's not a memory problem. Again, it's what am I focused on in this moment? And that determines what I'm hearing. Obviously, when I'm teaching, everything in my brain is focused on remembering names and making associations. So everybody has the capability to do that. We have to be mindful of, is this the time? Is this the place to have this conversation, to have this experience, to bring this subject up? Maybe it is, maybe it's not, right? And maybe it's never really going to be a perfect time, but if we want people to understand what our experience is in an effort to communicate mindfully and listen actively, we need to create space for that. We're not above that. It doesn't matter how much meditation you've done, doesn't matter how much inner work you've done. You still are wired like a human. I'm wired like a human, which means that, depending on what your dominant trait is, focusing, multitasking, or what have you, you're probably relating to somebody who is the opposite of you, which means you need space. That's the one common denominator, is if you create the space and if you create the opportunity to communicate in the way that you communicate the best. So this is where men get wrong, is they expect their partner, their female partners, to communicate with logic and to understand logic. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. I'm not saying women can't be logical, but that's just not their dominant trait, right? They are dominated by their emotions. If we had those same hormones running through our body and it was making all these connections to all these things, we would be overwhelmed too. We would be, going on this roller coaster ride with our emotions too. And we look like sociopaths to them because we have the ability to compartmentalize. So all that to say, there's all kinds of considerations going on before we start to villainize the other person. We need to understand these considerations. Again, this is the benefit of the 30,000 foot view, right? If we're on the ground level, yeah, I'm hurt. It's their fault. They're the problem. They're not listening, blah, 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 blah. And to them, we sound like that Charlie Brown teacher. Wah, 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 wah. As soon as we start getting our experience invalidated, effectively, we stop listening and really we stop communicating. It doesn't mean we stop talking. We stop communicating. And what was or what could have been a communication, it begins to morph into venting, ranting, complaining. And when we start doing that, the other person's not lit. It's now two people engaging in a monologue with each other. Nobody's listening. We've all had this experience, right? We've all had the experience. So both people could make the argument that you're not honoring my boundaries in that moment. Both people can make that argument. And all that really means is I don't feel seen and heard and appreciated and valued by you, and maybe even respected by you in this moment. You keep cutting me off. You keep bringing up the past. We talked about the past already. I thought we buried the past, but now we're talking about it again. You keep doing this. You keep doing that. I thought you loved me. I thought you loved me. And then you realize, if you're aware enough, you realize, we have two different definitions of love. That's really what we're arguing about. So then somebody has to go first and say, you know what? I'm overreacting right now. You can't say, whatever you do, you can't say you're overreacting right now. Calm down. And then we can talk about this. You have to keep it in your own experience. Okay. I'm overreacting right now. I'm triggered. I really want us to move past this or understand each other better. And then whatever kind of experience you need to get back to that place where you can really listen and show up and communicate. Maybe you need to take a little break. Maybe you need to get something to eat. Maybe you need to take a nap. Usually it's because we're lacking in rest or food, something really basic like that. Rest, food, maybe sex. I don't know. But something needs to kind of take the edge off. And then once you've had the sex, once you've eaten the food, once you've had the nap, you create the space ahead of time. So none of this, I'm going to be back when I feel like it and then coming back 2 days later. You have to again, you're treating this person like you want to be treated. Obviously, if we're triggered and we're feeling like somebody's not honoring our boundaries, we want to try to fix it as quickly as possible. And we all do much better if we know there's a time coming at a certain time or in a certain place. We're in a party right now. This is not the time to talk about it, but let's wait till we get back in the car and we'll talk about it then. Or let's wait till we get back home and we'll talk about it then. Or let's wait until tomorrow morning and we'll talk about it. Or tomorrow after work and we'll talk, to find a space, agree on the time, own your experience, which means it's not their fault. It's your fault. So own your experience. And somebody has to go first. So you have to essentially lead this. You have to model what you want the other person to do. You want them to show up. You want them to listen. You want them to communicate. You want them to honor. You want to feel seen, heard, and valued and appreciated and respected. So you have to do that for them as well. Now, here's the one caveat when we're trying to get the thing back on the rails. If you haven't really been having this kind of exchange, right, where you're able to reconcile, you have a system in place, you have infrastructure for reconciliation, and the tension has been building and building and building for months, for years, perhaps even for decades, then the drama that is going to ensue when people feel like their boundaries are not being honored or they're feeling like they're walking on eggshells is going to be a lot greater. The tension is a lot greater than if you were to do this really early on, even perhaps before you get into some major disagreement with your partner or with your friend or whatever. So there's a relationship between the proportion of the drama and the lag time that has taken place before you having this conversation. So, and it's kind of like this, right? If you're watching the movie Jaws about the shark from the 70s or whatever, you're watching Jaws, and then we all kind of know how that movie goes. The shark is going around eating people and whatever. And then Chef Brody at the end of the movie takes a shotgun and shoots like a fire extinguisher or something in the shark's mouth and blows it up. And the movie's over. I'm sorry I spoiled it for you, but if you haven't seen it in the last 50 years, you should have seen it by now. Anyway, imagine if in the third act of that movie, when Chef Brody's on the boat facing the shark, head to head, imagine if Chef Brody pulls out a lightsaber from Star Wars and then cuts the shark in half at the end of the movie, right? Imagine how you would have gone, where did he get a lightsaber from? We didn't see the lightsaber. Like that, you can't have a lightsaber in Jaws. That's in Star Wars. This is ridiculous. This movie is stupid. So what they do in filmmaking is whatever they use at the end of the movie, and once I tell you this, you're going to see it everywhere. Whatever they use at the end of the movie to kill the bad person, there was a hint that they had access to this thing in the beginning, the first 10 minutes of the movie. And they call it laying the pipe. You show the gun or the sword or the whatever it is. You see this in Star Wars. In the first 10 minutes of the movie, Luke Skywalker pulls this lightsaber out of the box on his home planet of Tatooine. And of course, at the end of the movie, he's in the duel with Darth Vader, right? So Sheriff Brody's got obviously guns because he's a sheriff. So it's not unusual for them to pull out the weapon at the end of the movie and use it to fix the situation. And so I want you to think about boundaries like that, right? If you want to have a boundary, or if something is really important for you to have a boundary around, you need to show it in the first 10 minutes of the relationship. You need to communicate that in the first 10 minutes of the relationship, meaning in the very beginning of the relationship, so that when you pull it out in the heat of the moment, when the duel is happening, they're not going to be surprised. Where did this boundary come from? It sounds like a healthy boundary as opposed to a toxic trait of yours that you're using to just be defensive and triggered and blah, 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 blah. All the stories that people project onto that. The only reason they project those stories is not because there's something wrong with it. It's because you never showed it. You didn't show it to the very end. So you got to show it in the beginning. And that way, when you pull it out at the end, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of knew that. And then that's how you can start to cultivate healthier dynamics with people. Show the boundary in the beginning, and then it just looks like a healthy boundary. Wait until the heat of the moment, until the duel happens, and everyone's defensive and on edge and projecting and not listening and, blah, 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 all the things we don't want. So That's the spiritual perspective on that. Hey, thanks for watching. This was a replay from one of the live weekly accountability sessions that I host in my online community, which is called the Happiness Insiders. If you have any questions about your experiences living life as a meditator, doing the inner work, and you want me to answer those questions live, you can just scan this QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below. And otherwise, here's a playlist from all of the Living the Practice videos that we have posted. All right, peace and love.